friends, and welcome to the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, also known as Dr. T Loves Books, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I may be an old dog, but I'm always trying to learn new tricks. In each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. As a good friend likes to say, we're better together. So I hope this podcast will help school librarians connect with and learn from each other. The opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. And because school librarians always strive to be good digital citizens, I cite sources when using material that is not my own. Without further ado, let's get to this week's episode. Hey everybody, we're back once again, and I am so excited. I've got another Tennessee friend here. Erika Long is going to be joining us, and she is sharing I'm really curious to hear about this lesson. It's about art, and that's not an area I know a lot about. So I'm going to learn lots of stuff, not only about the lesson, but about art too. So this is going to be fun. Erika, thank you so much for joining us. So glad you could be here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Steve. It's glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm Erika Long. I'm a secondary librarian. I like to say that because really my background was in high school. But fun fact, I have now been in middle school for longer than I've been in high school at this point.
Yay!
I often wonder why I'm still here in middle school.
They're fun.
But I also know that high school has changed a lot since I previously worked in it. And I actually did just work in it for like a couple of years ago. But anywho, my pronouns are she, her. I'm currently in the Metro Nashville Public Schools. I'm a middle school librarian at Thurgood Marshall Middle School. I worked at this school for 3 years previously, and this is my first year back.
Nice. They're lucky to have you. How did you end up in school librarianship? Like, was this a plan from the beginning, or how did you?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Probably very big known fact about me is that I absolutely did not want to be an educator my entire life. Didn't want it. My mother always said that I should. My dad said that I should be an entrepreneur or self-employed. But yeah, I didn't want to be a teacher because I didn't want to be responsible for someone's child not learning.
Yes. A lot of pressure.
It is a ton of pressure that I don't think the average person understands or knows, and they don't understand it because they don't know it. Librarianship is a third career. I spent some time in sports and nonprofit before shifting to library school. I spent some time working in sports in a couple of different capacities. One of them was as an academic mentor and tutor for college athletes.
Nice.
And in working with them over the years, that was about 7 years, working with them for that long. At the same time, I was also working in nonprofit, and I was just ready to shift. I needed a change from the nonprofit scene. And at the time, I did not have a master's degree. So while I thought about going full-time as an academic advisor or something higher in collegiate sports, I needed a master's degree to do that. So I didn't have it, and it was like, go back to school. So when I thought about going back to school, I really thought about the things that I felt strongly about in working with those students. And those were things like not knowing how to cite sources, or always having to help you craft an email that's professional to your professors. Lots of different things that were related to the work that school librarians do in terms of information literacy and digital literacy. And just some reflection led me to library school. And so I went back to school to get my master's degree in 2014 and have been in this game for 10 years now.
Nice. That's outstanding. Man, I don't know that if I would have made the connection between like citation and writing emails and connect that with the school library. So I think that's a really
Yeah.
interesting. I'm impressed by that.
It took a little work to get there.
Yeah,
I was
I
like,
bet.
what are the things that I would need to do? Like, whose responsibility is it to teach this? Because I couldn't lean on my own library experience for that. I was a
Hmm.
library kid in elementary, and a little bit in middle school. Like,
Hmm.
I have really vivid memories of my elementary school library. I have some memory of my high school library, but not a ton. I can't remember there being a librarian. I'm sure there was one because we had
Hmm.
a library. I
Yeah.
remember our class going down there. I remember us sitting at the tables with our teacher. I remember using that space after school for club meetings because I was in honor society. But a librarian and having library instruction in high school, I couldn't. That was something
Yeah.
that didn't stand out to me. I used librarians sometimes in college and undergrad, but again, like I had to do the work to figure out what role in the building, whose responsibility it was to try to pick up that mantle for me to figure out what that next career would be.
I am very impressed by that because, like I said, I would not have connected those dots, but you nailed it like right on the head. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
So now that you're in the library, you get to do all sorts of fun, cool stuff. And one of the fun, cool things you do is a lesson called the Renaissance Art Tour.
Uh huh.
So let's tell me about this Renaissance Art Tour. I am, like I said,
So
not an art person generally, so I'm really curious.
so this lesson, shockingly, in the 10 years that I've worked in education,
Mm,
is the first time that I have collaborated with a social studies or history content.
nice.
So, Renaissance time period is covered in Tennessee's seventh grade social studies courses.
Okay.
And so I collaborated with the teachers, one, because I shifted away from ELA and personalized, in professional learning networks.
Hmm.
So instead of my planning time typically being in English, I shifted over to our social studies content. One, because we have, not that they were struggling, but they were just kind of trying to get adjusted to this content because they hadn't previously taught social studies
Hmm.
in this way. So, one, it's just two people on this team, so they're trying to kind of get used to it, keep it fresh, get the kids engaged, and it just kind of came about organically. Um, they were talking about some of the resources that the district had provided, and they were pieces of or images of art. So some of them were like canvases or paintings, but some were sculptures, some was architecture. And so just the different things from that time period. And I love art. Am I the best at analyzing it? No, but I think the beauty of that is it's always open to interpretation. And so that's
Sure.
one of the things that I was able to lean on with one, crafting the lesson, but also encouraging the students that they could each see something different in all of these different works. So they wanted something where, so I was like, let me just do it. Let me do a gallery walk with you. And that's what happened. I love that it was the Renaissance time period because I could play on Beyonce with that. So when people come into your show notes and look at my slides, it's like I took Beyonce's Renaissance World Tour and X'd out the world and made it art. Um, so the teachers did a little bit of heavy lifting on the front end, right, to introduce what the Renaissance time period was, who some key figures are of that time period, and then once they had a little bit of that background knowledge, they came to me for this art gallery walk. And so they're
Mm,
used to gallery walks in their hallway, where teachers will put a quote or something up or something that they're working on in class, and then the kids will go around to each one. So for me, what I did was take a few different images. I did 2 or 3 paintings and one piece of architecture. Yeah, I did not do the
Okay.
sculpture as
Mm.
an option in this one. Um, and now that I think about that, I should have gone back and done it. But I created 2 sides of the room, so the library was divided into 2 sides,
Okay.
and each side had the same images, so
Okay.
that they could all get the same thing. And then I had them sitting at tables. We grouped them. I asked their teachers to group them before coming down, which is really important. One, because my school has a very high English language learner population.
Okay.
About 45% of our students speak Spanish,
Oh,
and
wow.
about another 19 to 20% speak a different language other than English. And
Wow.
so I need to make sure that they're grouped in a way that they have people that they can lean on in those groups if they don't understand what I'm like, if they don't understand my language. So, one, I use live presentations in PowerPoint. I take my Canva slides and I transfer them to PowerPoint so that I can use live presentation and turn the subtitles on. So that's
Nice.
helping my 43%, right? But I still have
Yeah.
another 19 or 20. Um, so they're grouped for that reason. But then one other reason is because the standard that I used from AASL was about learning in groups and using different points of views. So that was the other reason that they were grouped like that. Um,
That's great.
and
I love too that this is because it's a visual medium that you're working with them with. Even the ELL students, they may not have necessarily the language to express it, but it, like you said, it's so open to interpretation and it's really
right.
looking at like pattern matching. Why, how are these things similar across this time
Mm-hmm.
period? So you're really, it's, that's a, I hadn't, wow, I really like that
Yeah.
you were thinking about how can I incorporate, wow, that's awesome. I love that.
And one of the questions that I had for them as they were going through the gallery walk, so I would take an image, put the image up, put the standards that we were working on, and put a paragraph about the time period, and then another paragraph about the artist and the work in front of them.
Okay.
And then after they've gone through and read that as a group, so that I assigned them each a number, and like number one's going to be responsible for talking about the standards. Number two is going to be responsible for reading the prompt or the paragraph about the artist. The next person is reading the prompt. So each prompt was different for each. I called them masterpieces.
Nice. I like that.
So at each masterpiece they had in the gallery, they had a prompt on there. And so they were different level questions. So some were level 1, some were level 4, some were level 5. So it kind of varied to mix it up, right? And
Hmm.
then also knowing that observations do exist and we're trying to make sure
Yes.
that we're meeting all of our indicators.
Yes.
um,
Absolutely.
but also, having a level 1 question for my level 1 students who are EL, like,
Right.
works out well, right? And my high achievers, I've got a level 5 question for you mixed in somewhere. So
Hmm.
you've really got this balance.
That's such
Um,
a great way to differentiate. I mean, you have differentiated this in such a wonderfully authentic and um, logical way. Like
mhm.
the planning that you put into making this come together like this is blowing my mind because this is so clever.
I want to do a sidebar here. Is that the planning is one of the times where I was like, why do teachers do this every day?
It's a
And
lot.
I feel for the people who have like 4 different preps in secondary. I don't know
Yeah.
how they do it.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to plan this lesson. I collaborated with our English language learner coach, who also is the content chair for our social studies team.
Oh.
And so having that like piece in there to help me on the parts where I'm not as knowledgeable, especially the EL piece, right?
Hmm.
Because I feel like we do some stuff in our school to make sure that we're meeting the goals, but I know that there are things that we can do greater. And so this was one of the times where I wanted to lean in and really tap into the greater that we can do,
Mm-hmm.
because I, as a librarian, sometimes or a lot of times know that I'm not doing my best to serve them, because translating is not the end all be all. It's not
Sure.
everything that they deserve, right?
Right.
So
Right.
anyway, bringing it back. So I had all of those things at each masterpiece, and then I gave them about 5 to 6 minutes. What I did notice is that, and then we would rotate. After they wrote their answer to the prompt, they had post-it notes at each station. So they would write their post-it note answer on there and as a group. And then we would rotate. What I did find is that they didn't need the whole 5 to 6 minutes every rotation.
Okay.
So I had four different masterpieces. So they would rotate 3 times. But because the standards were the same, because the paragraph about the time period was the same, they didn't really need that on the third and fourth masterpiece. So then I can take some of that time back, which did allow me to have extra time for them when they did their exit ticket, because their exit ticket was pretty extensive. I did a 3-2-1, and the 3-2-1 was 3 things you learned, 2 questions you have, and a 1 sentence summary. But their summary, they had to include words from the word bank
Mm.
that I provided. And so those were just vocabulary words from their content. But that's a lot in, like, most exit tickets will take you a minute if
Right.
you're just trying to get a real, like, quick pulse
Yeah.
of what they know or what they gained from it. And so I feel like that one required at least 5 minutes. And so if you're taking back some of that time in the third and fourth rotation because you don't need to reread every
Mm-hmm.
time, it gives you some time on the back end.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. And uh, was this the first time you were doing this lesson, or have you done this previous times?
This was my first time.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, it sounds like there was a lot. I love that the kids are coming in preloaded with some knowledge from social studies as they're walking through the door. So you're not starting from scratch with them. And
Yeah.
that kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility to kind of get to some of the activities.
Yeah, it's always hard to start from scratch, because you don't really that's why I like to plan with teachers ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
I like to ask them certain questions about what their goal is, what they want, like what they have as the objective for their students with me, because then I can really craft the lesson the way that it's supposed to meet the needs of them and meet that objective so that the teacher can do what they need to do when they get back to the classroom. But it's hard to do that on the front end when they don't have the prior knowledge of the content,
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
because that teacher teaches that content a certain way. They're the one who's the expert in that. I'm not the expert in that content. That's why I'm in the library. I'm an expert in seeking information. I can do
Right.
that all day,
Right.
um, and using information. But yeah, it's harder to do it the other way around.
Well, this lesson certainly it requires a lot of close collaboration with your teachers, which I love. Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times for library, it can be a little bit catch as catch can, like, oh, can you take my kids for an hour? Okay, here's an information literacy lesson I can whip out that, I can
Mm-hmm.
do whether or not you've done other stuff. But this is clearly very integrated with what they're doing in their classes, which is awesome.
Right.
Like that they're seeing the library is not just a separate space, it's a bridge
Mm-hmm.
between your classes and what you're doing. Having done this for the first time and having sort of seen how things went, are you sort of reflecting, formulating? Are there any things you see changing as you move forward? Are you planning to do it again, I guess, is the first question.
Not this year.
Okay.
We're done. I did both of the teachers, so I've done every student in seventh grade. So
Wow.
every student in
Okay.
seventh grade has had this lesson. Um, I would do it again in a different year, right? When they are hitting that standard again, or those standards again. One of the things that I did in my lesson was ask for feedback. So
Mm-hmm.
I did a fist to five. How did you enjoy the gallery walk? Fist to
Okay.
five. And they didn't know ahead of time because then they would have all just said 5. So after they gave me their responses, I then went back and said, what would have made it better? What would have made it a 5? And so they had to give me the reason that what I could have done to make it a 5. Some people said have food. Some people said get through all of them, because like my first and second one, we didn't get through all of them because I didn't hit that learning curve yet. So
Okay.
I kept giving them those 6 minutes the whole
Mm-hmm.
time, not realizing that they weren't really, they were getting through it faster. And I'm over here like listening in to other people and not paying attention to the fact that we've hit this lull, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, modifying the timing in that way, I think I would go back and, like I said, in hindsight, I should have added a sculpted piece to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would do the architecture differently, either keep it in and add more content or discussion around what the commonalities were in architecture
Mm-hmm.
during that time, because we talked a lot about painting, like having the very muted tones, the blank faces,
Mm-hmm.
no smiles and things like that. How there's a lot of religious aspects to it and all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. So I think that it very much so focused on the art piece,
Mm-hmm.
on the painting in terms of art. But um, if I kept a a piece of architecture in there in the future, then I would definitely make sure to go in and add some highlights to that on the front end, before starting the gallery walk.
I
Um,
love that you included architecture at all, because when you were saying art,
yeah,
like it literally would not have occurred to me. Like, yes, the architecture is also artistic. Like that's
yeah.
part of the movement, and
So
I
what
think
I
it's
think
great.
one of the things that I learned in preparing for this lesson was some of the people that we think of as painters were also architects.
Mm, yeah,
It is not something that we just absolutely think of on the front end. And so it was a learning opportunity for me. And that's why I wanted to make sure that I included it in there.
I love it. And I mean, I guess that's part of the origin of that phrase. Like, you're a Renaissance person, that you have all these different
Yeah,
skills that you can incorporate, and it makes sense, and yet not something I would have thought of. I'm so glad that
yeah.
you were able to bring that to the students and help them see, like, yeah, there's more to this than just paint on a canvas. I love that. Huh.
Yeah.
I've got one other question about just the general, I guess, logistics of it. So you were
Mhm.
working with the social studies teachers, and they had done a bunch of background to get the kids sort of ready. How did that end up translating into the kids come to the library as opposed to them doing this maybe in their classrooms? Like, was there a reason for that crossover, or was it just to kind of cement the connection between the two spaces for the students? Or
So I will say this: in our in those specific classrooms, they don't get a lot of like movement time.
gotcha.
And I'm very big on the person doing the most work is the person doing the learning, right? The person talking the most is the person learning the most. And so that's why I don't do a ton of talking in my
Mm.
teaching. I leave the heavy lifting to them. They're the ones who are supposed to be tired at the end of the day, not me. Um, so um, they had, again, they had these resources that the district has put into this folder. And it's like, okay, but I really lean on my textbook. What am I supposed to do with this? Right. And
Right.
so I could see it, like as soon as I see the resources, I could see it in my head and see it taking shape. And I could have easily done it in their classroom, but why? Because sometimes you get more out of a kid when you change up their space. I
Absolutely.
could easily go teach any library lesson in somebody's classroom because the resources that I'm using are digital. You
Hmm.
got your laptop. I don't have to bring you down here so you can use the computer.
Hmm.
But sometimes just a change of environment switches it up for them and it kind of changes the way that they feel about learning. And you just sometimes you just want to. I don't stay in the library all day. I go in people's classrooms. I
Yeah.
go in people's offices. Like I got to get out of that just to keep it fresh. And so I'm always happy to do that, but that doesn't mean that I don't go teach in classrooms because sometimes I do.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. I was just curious if there was, logistically like, oh, well, they didn't have the space, but it makes a ton of sense, even just to for the even if the only reason was just to give the kids the
Mm,
chance to move around and get a different perspective. I think that's
yeah,
incredibly important because, like you said, it's easy to get bored learning in the same space and kind of you get into a particular mindset in your classroom,
you
and then when you
do.
go to the library, different mindset, different setting. So
Right.
I think that's great. If someone was going to try and do this for the first time, like they're starting from scratch, they've got your idea, they've got your slides, do you have any suggestions, advice for things they should have in mind as they get ready to do this for the first time?
I think knowing your audience is a big piece of that. And I guess I
Mm,
shouldn't say audience, but knowing your students. Like I know that I needed the supports from my EO coach because
yeah.
of my history and how I felt like I wasn't serving them well. Um, I, so knowing your students, knowing or having some knowledge, like bare bone knowledge of the content, is important as well because you're questioning the kids, right? But they're probably going to have a question to you as well.
Hmm.
And being able to answer that. Now, can the teacher step in? Absolutely. But what if they happen to walk out and go to the bathroom?
Right. Well, I think it's
um,
great. Like so often when we do library lessons, I think the teachers learn as much as the students when we're doing stuff about digital
yeah,
literacy or resources or whatever. So I think it's great when we get the opportunity to sort of flip that script a little bit and maybe learn some stuff from the teachers and, be the student to the teacher so that we can maybe bring that extra content. That's great. I think
that's
that
true.
opens up such a great two-way street between, both sides of that divide, as it were.
Yeah. The
Really
last
like
thing that I would say about this one is to just like it is definitely not one that you can just it's not a pocket lesson at all. There's a lot of prep that goes into it, and while I've done like the biggest part of the prep, there's still like pulling the images that you want to choose. I had the citations on there because they need to know citations. Like we're still
yes.
gonna be library up in here, right?
Yes.
So the citations were on there, like printing out all of the resources, and me like I eliminated some of them because I knew like I wasn't teaching all of these kids in the same day. So
Yeah.
having that laminated helped it to last longer because I needed it for over a week.
Yeah.
So just things like that, like it's definitely not a pocket lesson. So having the time ahead of time to prepare all of the stuff that you need, because even printing all of the masterpieces out and having the prompt with it and the paragraphs to go with it with the standards, I did all of that and pasted it on chart paper, and then
Mm,
pasted the chart paper around the rooms. So
nice.
yeah, you gotta have that time to make sure that you can get everything done and set up.
Yeah. And when you said laminating the pieces, I hadn't thought about that, but man, that'd be a great tool to have that you could then have the kids like with whiteboard markers, they could write on the laminated stuff and like, okay,
That's
circle the
true.
thing that's
Yeah,
stands out in this or whatever it might be. Huh.
yeah,
I like that. I would not have thought to laminate. That's so,
yeah.
I love it. Man, all right. I love this lesson. There's so many cool things going on in this that
Thanks.
are just not things that would have occurred to me. And that's one of the things I love about doing this podcast is I get to learn awesome stuff. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing this lesson.
You're welcome.
Now we are going to go in a completely different direction. We're going to take our book break.
Book break. Sweetie.
You get to share any book you want to share. It can be something personal, professional, for the students, for the staff, for whoever, whatever you like. Share a book that you've enjoyed that we can enjoy too.
um, just I don't. I was about to ask the question is if I'm like out in front of people who can see me. Hey, do you use Libro FM? Um,
I
um,
have not used Libro
but
FM. I
oh
know it
my goodness,
exists.
you have to use Libro. There are
Yeah.
few days left in February, and Asia Wilson's memoir, Dear Black Girls, How to Be True to You, is one of the educator listening copies for February.
Okay.
And if you download it, you can listen to it whenever, but it won't be up there after February as an
Okay.
early listening copy. After February, you would have to pay for it. Let me just say it that way. So I absolutely love Asia Wilson. I'm a huge fan of Dawn Staley and the University of South Carolina Gamecocks women's basketball team. I love the Aces. There are some people on that team that I absolutely adore. Candace Parker, Tennessee. Um, so, um, so I was very stoked to see her release a memoir. And there
I'm
are
gonna
things.
I'm gonna
Go
plead
ahead.
ignorance here. I don't know who Asia Wilson is, so if you can enlighten me, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, so Asia Wilson is a women's basketball player. She plays in the WNBA for the Las Vegas Aces.
Okay.
She is a now two-time WNBA champion. She's
Nice.
also a two-time MVP of the championship tournament.
Hmm.
She's a native of South Carolina. She went to USC and played under Dawn Staley, the USC South Carolina, not the USC California, for those listening. She is so cool in sharing this story. And the reason it seems behind her sharing her story is one, she's in awe of the fact that she is where she is, to be a person who did not know for the longest time that she struggled because she has dyslexia.
Hmm.
She was in her teens or later in life when
Hmm.
she was diagnosed. And so a lot of the time growing up, she wasn't sure. She just didn't feel confident because she knew that there were things that she was missing, but she couldn't put a name to it, and nobody else did either.
Hmm.
Um, she writes this as a kind of love letter, I think, to girls, and helping them to, one, like, understand that those little times where you're not feeling like yourself, or you don't feel like you belong, or you don't know where you belong, it's okay. Like, we've all been at that stage. And kind of just walking through some of her experiences and the people who helped her kind of navigate those. And some of those
Hmm.
people were like her grandmother, Coach Staley, her parents. Her dad was one, and that was one that where she felt like she was disappointing him because he
Hmm.
was this basketball player back in the day. He used to play overseas. She was not a basketball player. She just kind of so happened into it, um,
Huh.
and wasn't good at it. And he told her, it's okay if you like don't want to do this because you don't have it in you. Like, you don't show that you want this. And so she ended up coming back to him and letting him know that she did. And that's when she kind of like pushed up her work ethic. And so I
Hmm.
think it's just really um, a sentimental sharing or offering for the masses. And it's, like I said, it's really cool to have this woman who has grown into her own, has learned how to navigate life as a person with dyslexia, um, and now can say that she's an author because, as she says, who would have thought a little girl with dyslexia would be an author of a New York Times bestselling book? So,
That's so amazing. I love that. Wow. Oh, I definitely,
yeah.
well, now I have to go to Libro FM and check this out because this sounds amazing. Wow, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
Make sure
you.
you get on there as an educator.
Okay.
They have tons of early listening copies available each month, and they switch out each month.
Okay.
So you just
I'm not
add it to
usually
the
much of
cart,
a
and it's free.
Okay.
an
I'm not
audio
usually
person.
much of an audiobook person generally, but if it's the right audiobook,
Yeah.
I mean, it just sucks you in.
I was
So,
just gonna say that. I'm very much so a print person, but my commute is a lot longer now. So sometimes I can just get through audiobooks faster because I'm driving an hour each way.
oh
Um,
yeah.
and I can knock those things out while I'm driving.
I know our friend Amy Herman has become a huge lover of audiobooks because she listens to them on her commute. She listens to them when she's around the house doing
Yeah,
stuff. She loves them. She's always recommending them, and
yeah.
I need to work on that for myself
Now,
because I know that's a great way to take in material in a different way.
there are some things that I won't recommend on audio. I think it definitely has to have the absolute right um, narrator.
Mm.
I've listened to part of a book before, and the narrator won awards for this book, and I was like, it's not my, I can't do it. And it's
Sometimes
not
that
that
happens.
particular book. It's just
Hmm.
I don't do well with that narrator's voice because they've narrated some other stuff, and I've not
Hmm.
listened to it either because it just I try it just doesn't work. Are
Yeah.
they phenomenal at their job? Absolutely, because they're also an actress. And I was like, I will watch you any day on TV, but this just isn't working for me. It's not my jam, and that's okay. We all have different things. We have different tastes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But some other people absolutely loved them on there. So it's all about, it's all about preference.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, nothing wrong with that. We all have our
Yeah,
preferences, and as long as we're enjoying what we're enjoying, that's what matters. That's where
there
it
you
comes
go.
down to. So, love it. All right, I'm definitely going to dig into that. Well, thank you again so much. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to share this awesome lesson and this awesome book
You're
recommendation. I'm very
welcome.
excited to dig into this myself a little bit, play around a little bit. This seems like a lot of fun, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes, which include not only a link to the lesson, but also links to the SLLN website, home to a curated list of free upcoming virtual events and resources for school librarians. It's easy to become a member of the network. Just visit the site and use what you like. If you have an idea, a question, or a lesson you want to share, you can email schoolliblearning@gmail.com. That's school, L-I-B, learning@gmail.com. Know someone with a great school library lesson? Let us know. Until next time, be safe, be good, and be well.